Welcome to the panel, the digital workshop on healthcare, which is part of the Canada-Italy Business Forum on Artificial Intelligence. Una grande benvenuto a tutti, un grand bonjour à tous et bienvenue au panel sur la santé dans le cadre du Forum d'affaires Canada-Italie sur l'intelligence artificielle. Thank you so much for joining today. We've had the chance yesterday to listen during the opening plenary on overarching comments. There were some panels yesterday and some more today. This panel will really focus on healthcare. So to be more specific, the delivery of healthcare services, as well as matters related to clinical trials or the use of data of healthcare data. We will not discuss on this panel biotechnology per se, which was and pharmaceuticals, which were discussed in yesterday's panel. My name is Cédric Bisson. I'm the moderator of this panel. I'm also a partner at Teralys Capital, which is we're Canada's largest private innovation-focused investor, and we are highly involved in biotechnology, IT, and of course, artificial intelligence. On the panel today, we will have a few speakers with us. If I can have perhaps the next slide. And we will hear from 4 speakers from Italy, 3 speakers from Canada. They all represent different facets of AI in healthcare. And we will, after the presentations, which will be brief from our 7 panelists, we'll go into a Q&A and panel discussion, which would last about an hour, for 50 minutes to an hour maximum. And then as a closing keynote, we are privileged to have Dr. Bassini, who will discuss with us as a keynote speaker his experience with supercomputing in CINECA in Italy. So without undue delay, I will introduce the first speaker. The first speaker is Fabio Galbusera, who's working at the Galeazzi Hospital, and more specifically, the Orthopedic Institute, where he has developed a series of algorithms for medical image analysis and spinal surgery. Fabio, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cédric, for the nice introduction. Can I have my first slide? Okay, thank you. So Galeazzi, Istituto Ortopedico Galeazzi, is one of the 2 largest being the Istituto Ortopedico Rizzoli in Bologna, and it's also a research institute. So we are officially recognized by the government as a research hospital with a specialization in musculoskeletal diseases. And that's the meaning of this IRCCS acronym that you see up there. You can see from these numbers, we do quite a lot of surgeries per year, really high numbers, and I'm especially proud of the spine surgeries because my research is spine surgery indeed. I'm an engineer, but I'm working mostly in the field of spine biomechanics, spine surgery, and AI applied to the spine. So Galeazzi is really, I would say, the biggest reference center in Italy for complex cases of spine surgery. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So as you can see from this picture, we are building a new building, actually. Galeazzi will move to another location. And you can see here on the left the current state of the constructions, and on the right, the rendering of how it will appear in 1 year from now, I would say. And this new building is located into the Milano Innovation District, MIND, which is located in the area where there was the Expo in 2015. And it's an area of the city where there will be the biggest concentration of companies and institutions working in research, which is a big funded by the government, will be located in the same area, and also a part of the public University of Milan will be our neighbor, I would say. Can we have the next slide, please? Well, and that's a very short summary of our research activity in the field of AI, so I'm responsible of this area of research. We can see here a couple of examples. So we're working a lot on radiology, images of the spine especially, but also in other fields. And we are trying to build models able to perform automated analysis and perform some measurements like angles and so on X-rays of the spine or MRIs and so on, as you can see here on the left. We also have a good method which is able to calculate the motion of joints, motion of the spine, as you see here with some examples on the right. We are able to calculate the range of motion, rotation, and so on in a fully automatic and totally repeatable way. And we also use AI in order to perform some grading of degenerative phenotypes. You see here on the bottom an example of the grading of intervertebral disc degeneration performed on the T2-weighted MRI. So what you see here are 5 examples of intervertebral discs. On the left, we have a, let's say, good one, non-degenerated one, and proceeding to the right, we have the mostly degenerated ones. So we have methods locate discs inside the MRI of the spine and assign a label about the degree of degeneration for each disc that we find. And also many other things. We're also working on predictive models. So we are starting to create models able to predict the outcome of a surgery based on some preoperative information. That's all for my presentation. And we can run. Thank you.
Fabio, thank you very much. This is extremely interesting, and we'll discuss in more detail later, how you can use AI and the challenges related to AI in that field. Our next speaker, briefly, will be Marco Foracchia. Marco Foracchia is the Chief Information Officer, CIO, at one of the big regional health agencies in Reggio Emilia. And he will discuss with us or briefly present how he's using AI to extract insights from the local electronic health record. And we're going to listen with interest as we have our own electronic health record here in Canada. So over to you, Marco.
Thank you, Cédric. Can I have my slides up? Thank you. Okay, what I will present to you is actually something from my region, from the regional electronic health record. Can I have the next slide, please? The Emilia Romagna healthcare system, public healthcare system, has developed since 2006. So this is it's been quite a long project. The Sole Sanitaria online Emilia Romagna project, which was designed in the beginning to basically gather all structured information from all public health institutions in the region, and has been extended in a later time to also private institutions in a single central registry, which was meant in the beginning to provide information to GPs, to general practitioners and pediatricians, and at a later stage also to provide access also to patients to their own personal electronic health record. Next slide, please. This project is now fully operational, in the sense that all public institutions and most private institutions now ship their clinical data, structured data, to this central repository. We have now data for roughly 4.5 million people, and we gather 87 million clinical documents per year, structured documents, and 62 million prescriptions per year. So we can say basically that all main clinical information regarding our population is now stored in a central registry and can be accessed for the initial purposes, which actually were the original purposes for the SOLE project to be designed, which were providing information to GPs and to the patient themselves. But of course, all this information is now ready to be used also for other purposes. Next slide, please. So now that we have all this data, and we also have the closed loop approach in operations, we're ready for the next step. Basically, what we have is we have a centralized repository of all clinical information, structured information that can be used to be processed and pumped back into the system to be provided either to the patients or to the general practitioners or to the clinical institutions. So basically what we're starting to do now is use this information not only for distribution, but also for processing, and provide further clinical information, clinical decision support information to healthcare institutions in a centralized way. And of course, gathering information, gathering insight from the general availability of all this information. Next slide. Just to give you a couple of examples, what we already do. The first example has been in operational for some years now. We have a closed loop evaluation of all clinical evidence to select patients eligible for priority flu vaccination. And this information, this processing is done, of course, online and is provided back to the general practitioners, which are the ones who actually call the patients to be vaccinated and informed of the reasons why they are called and have a priority access to this campaign, to this vaccination. And something more recent that we've done is we process all geolocalized clinical information regarding the COVID-19 pandemic to detect automatically and to inform back the local authorities, local health authorities about probable local outbreaks of the pandemic. Of course, these two examples currently do not rely on AI technology, but the whole platform, the whole philosophy of the Solar project is ready to actually put AI and big data processing in the loop and use it effectively, both for gathering insights from the huge amount of information, huge amount of data that we have, and also use effectively the fact that we are connected back in the loop with the local health institutions, which could receive information online on the results of the processing. So this is a presentation of what we're currently doing and how we basically built a platform that, in our opinion, is ready to leverage all the possible applications of AI in the future. Thank you.
Grazie mille, Marco. This is very interesting. It's actually a very nice segue into our next presentation from Alexandre Le Boutillier at Imagia. Imagia is working also with the healthcare system to generate significant insights into the usage of the healthcare system, into potential, precision medicine, all the while maintaining data privacy. So, Alexandre, over to you.
It's my pleasure, Cédric, to be with you this morning, and I would like to thank the organizer and RBC for sponsoring this event. So I'm going to focus the discussion today around AI, of course, but also a very important concept, which is privacy preserving. So on the next slide, you will see that what's really important is while we've developed a lot of insights and a lot of data in the last 7 years, we still have a lot of misdiagnosis, and the treatment that we get while they're improving, it's difficult to predict which treatment will respond well to which person. So really the promise of using AI in the realm of precision medicine and personalized healthcare. On the next slide, you will see an interesting video, if it can be played. Otherwise, you can just look at this image. That's really interesting because some of you might think this looks like a CT scan, but in fact, it is not. It is a dream of a computer where we were able to feed a machine with a lot of normal CT scan, and the machine was able to extract what are the normal features of a CT scan. So this falls into the realm of synthetic data, but also show that the machine can extract a feature from data set so we can have a better understanding of what's normality, abnormality, and also specific disease. On the next slide, I'll think that's very important to look what we can do with those data. So of course, we want to unlock the data. I think the panel will focus a lot on that. We want to get insight, but one of the major element that we need to focus is really collaboration. So for the short story, Cédric, my best friend, was doing his postdoc in Bologna. So I spent some time in Bologna, and they were always building the highest towers in the medieval time. So I think we have to be careful with data gathering. It's not the largest data that you gather. First, it's the quality, but it's also the diversity. So you want to gather data, yes, from big center, but you want to gather that data from a distributed fashion to capture that diversity, to make sure that whatever you come up, whether it's a treatment optimization, it's a response prediction system, or clinical decision support, that is very robust in terms of discovery. On the next slide, I think we've made a lot of progress in Canada, and specifically around the way that we can use AI in a responsible way. So we'll discuss today about autonomy, privacy, and diversity principle, and how we can apply this by design. On the next slide. So those slides, I'll keep it for later if it's possible. So next slide. Sorry about that. Next slide, I'll keep that. Wrong presentation. 2 slides more, please. Again. Perfect, that was it. Just to tell you from a Canadian perspective that we were able to gather around 100 organizations to deploy such a discovery platform that we'll discuss more today. It's called the DHDP.ca, and this platform is co-led by Imagia and the Terry Fox Research Institute. It's a $200 million initiative where we apply those discovery principles on a distributed data set. And we want that to be a model and enable international collaboration. So we already are working with hospitals in the United States and in Europe. So I think it's go back to the collaboration, which I think it's key in capturing diversity in data. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Alexandre. Thank you very much, Alexandre. Merci. That's very interesting. And for those that don't know, the Terry Fox is one of Canada's largest cancer research foundations, and Alexandre through Imagia has gathered a very significant number of collaborators. We'll discuss that later. That's a nice segue. So thank you, Alexandre. It's a nice segue into the next presenter, which is Dr.
Hello?
Yes, Dr. Ferry. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, it's over to you. You will discuss what you're doing with briefly with Advice Pharma in Milano. Over to you.
Yes, thank you. I should have a couple of slides maybe, but okay, here we are. So Advice Pharma is, we call it digital medicine CRO. So next slide. So it started, can I have the next slide, please? Then it's the company started in almost 10 years ago as a clinical solution provider. Then later I did a service for clinical data management and clinical operation, becoming a full service CRO. And recently we received a certification as a medical device manufacturer to develop digital therapeutics as a software as a medical devices. Next slide, please. And later on, if I can have the next slide, of course, we developed several electronic data capture solutions to try to leverage our information technology knowledge to provide advanced services in terms of data capture for clinical research. Next slide, please. And currently, as a CRO, we are integrating several medical devices, connecting them to our electronic data capture technology, ICE, and using validated devices to collect millions of data and in a standardized way that enable us to provide a solution for engaging patients from home and capture millions of data that can later on be analyzed with different algorithms, and also be validated for machine learning system and artificial intelligence solution to investigate and to do some data mining of the millions of data captured. Next slide, please. Okay, and so with our technologies, we also started in the last year several projects of development of digital medicine solution. First, in this slide, you can see a publication of one of our apps that has been developed for lung cancer patients for remote monitoring of the clinical parameters of this disease, and has been also published the experience of the clinical trial, multi-center clinical trial, where the patients are randomized to receive this digital medicine to manage their condition together, of course, with their reference doctor, and comparing the digital medicine arm with a standard treatment arm group of patients. Next slide, please. And the digital medicine solution can also become the new digital formulation, especially when we speak about digital therapeutics. And digital therapeutics, we have a couple of them already in development with the large pharmaceutical firms that want to associate this digital solution for different pathologies to their standard therapeutic proposals. So this can be a drug formulation, because they believe that the combination of the digital therapeutics with the drug can really create a differential value for their therapeutic proposal and to make them more competitive in the market. Next slide, please. If I can have the next slide. And therefore, Advice Pharma as a CRO has created several assets, so technologies for the development of digital therapeutics and digital medicine platform, and then to move this solution in the clinical trial scenario to validate this as a software, as a medical device, while in North America, in the US market, FDA is regulating digital therapeutics differently from medical devices and pharmaceutical products. In Europe, still the software for digital therapeutics are considered as medical devices. Therefore, we have developed a process to validate our solution as medical devices according to the ISO 13485 that Advice Pharma has been certified for. The next slide, please. Okay, and that's it. So Advice Pharma is based in the business incubator of Polytechnic of Milano, that is the main engineering university in Italy, and is also partnering with other entities in this business incubator, but also collaborate with the major international pharmaceutical companies, both in managing electronic data capture project and their management around Europe, but it's recently focusing on developing digital therapeutics solution for all the European players. And that's it. Cédric.
Grazie Alessandro. Thank you very much. So we'll cross the Atlantic now, and we're going to hear from John Kildea at Opal Med Apps, who is affiliated with McGill University. They have developed a quite interesting patient portal tool focused on patient-reported outcomes. So over to you, John.
Thank you very much, Cédric, and thank you for the invitation to speak. So we all know in the last 10 years, the last 20 years, in fact, that improving artificial intelligence have come about to due mainly to improvements in algorithms, improvements in computational power, and the increase in data that are available to be used. However, we also know that in healthcare, access to the data that are produced is not always easy, and is part of the problem of trying to make AI work in healthcare. So the solution that we are working on is to bring and involve the patient in giving us their data, because after all, it is the patient who is the ultimate source of data and the person and the partner with the greatest vested interest in the data. So the solution we're putting together is really putting the patient in the center. Next slide, please. So in order to make this work, it needs to be a win for all players, a win for patients, a win for clinicians, and a win for researchers. So our solution is tackling all three parts of this. First of all, by producing a patient portal that gives the patients access to their data via a mobile phone app, allows patients to donate or report their symptoms and to donate data that they get access to. Of course, in order to really make it work, the clinicians need to be involved as well. We have a virtual clinic that the doctors can use to see data that patients are reporting, and also to engage with patients and set up rules for the publishing of data that make it to patients. For researchers, we're working on a solution that ultimately we hope will involve many hospitals and allow patients to access their data simultaneously from multiple hospitals, but also to donate their data from those hospitals, so that not only would we get data for research from a single hospital, but we get an enriched deep data set from multiple hospitals. And I'll go to the next slide. And this is just a very quick view of what the solution looks like for patients. And this is in use at the moment at the Cedars Cancer Center of the McGill University Health Center. Patients have access to their data, are able to check in for appointments on arrival at the hospital, and are able to respond to questionnaires that are automatically sent based on their disease and treatment, and also able to read education material or access education material to better understand their disease and their treatments. Next slide. And you can see here, this is just a mock-up at this moment of working on our data donation. So in the background, the algorithms know what the patient is suffering from. They know what we're treating for, and they know what patient is eligible for a particular study, and if they have the data that would be needed for a particular study. So we can invite patients to participate in studies by donating their data. And this is a project that we are working on putting in place at the moment. I go to the next slide. But really, in order for this to work, and in order for patients to be engaged and to give us their data for research, we first need to make it worthwhile for patients to open up the app, to get involved, to get their data, and then to provide us their data. So we believe by having an app that empowers patients to be partners in their own care, then ultimately they will be better motivated to donate their data for research and help us get the data that we need to solve the problem of access for AI. And that's my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. I think speaking of patients donating their data, our next speaker is Dr. Sheldon Ellman, who's the chairman at Carebook, which has developed a very interesting customer-centric digital set of products for pharmacies, insurance providers, governments, and other businesses. Sheldon, over to you.
Mille grazie. Thank you, Cédric. Io sono dottore Sheldon Ellman, un medico clinico, and I'm totally delighted to be here with you today, but I would rather be in my favorite place on earth, in Monte Argentario. But obviously the pandemic has affected all our lives. So just 2 minutes of background, because I don't have much time. I'm a healthcare entrepreneur here in Canada. We now have the largest private equity fund in healthcare in Canada and venture capital. We have about 4,000 employees, about $500 million of assets under management, and some unbelievably innovative companies in the digital health space using artificial intelligence. And thank you, Cédric, for inviting me. I'm honored to be with the other panelists here on the phone here in Montreal, and also in my favorite country on earth is Italy. So, but I just wanted to focus very briefly on something that we can use AI not to help the doctors or the hospitals or the systems, as important as that is. I'm going to present you AI in one of our companies called CareBook as to how to use that to save your life and your family's life immediately with respect to the pandemic that is affecting all of us. And our company is called CareBook. It's based here in Montreal, but is a global company. We have over 4 million users on the platform. And I'll show you very, very briefly what we do using AI to manage COVID. So if I could have the next slide, please. So this is a space-age technology that uses AI to recognize when people have COVID and how to manage COVID. And it's 4 easy steps, although it is very sophisticated in the background with respect to AI. So basically, just by simply using your cell phone, all right, either an Android or an Apple device, and by looking into your cell phone and basically taking a video of yourself, we can analyze your face and look at the reflection of light right under your eyes. So it's not facial recognition, and privacy and security is maintained. And using the same technology that one would have here in the back of your Apple Watch, we look at the light reflection over here, analyze it in a way called PPG or RPPG remotely, and input that into our platform. So we then do the assessment, we do the scan, and we do what's called guidance as to whether you should go to the hospital or you can safely stay home, or whether you can go to work or you have to stay home. And obviously everybody today is looking for a solution as to how to manage their health during COVID, and then hopefully, in not that distant future, we will have a post-COVID environment and everybody wants to be safe. So next slide, please. So very easy to do, all right? And all of this takes less than 60 seconds, so 1 minute, all right? And basically, next slide, please. In conjunction with the Jewish General Hospital here in Montreal and CareBook, we've developed the algorithms necessary to identify an individual who is having any symptoms related to COVID. So, and all the underlying issues as to for people who have diabetes or cancer or immune system disorders, and obviously whether one is taking medication or not. And next slide, please. And then all you do is you just look at yourself in your cell phone, all right? And you, for 30 seconds, the system runs, it processes the light recognition on your face and allows you to then measure your heart rate, your respiratory rate, and your oxygen saturation, which are 3 of the most significant factors in determining how sick you are, and should you go to the emergency room or can you stay home, or, you know, and because many people do not have a pulse oximeter at home to measure their oxygen saturation. This does this by looking into the phone, no medical devices and no sensors on you. Next slide, please. And by doing so, as I just said, you get your heart rate, your respiratory rate, and your oxygen saturation. As many of you know, and Italy has been significantly affected in the first wave and now in the second wave, and hopefully we will avoid a significant third wave, but people drop their oxygen levels and then have to be transported to the hospital because of how COVID is affecting their lungs. Next slide, please. All of this is an automatic 30-second measurement by looking at your face and some very sophisticated AI algorithms and the other algorithms that decide whether you should stay home or not. Next slide, please. And obviously, with respect to this is a question of, we can then tell you and localize whether you are safe to stay home or safe to go to work, because people will obviously want to know, can I go to work? Can I go to the football stadium, the soccer stadium? Can I go to a movie and stuff like that? So these are simple ways of deciding, using AI to help people manage their health and integrate that into as my other colleagues have said, into the electronic medical record or telemedicine, as to how you manage that with your ongoing telemedicine provider. So I just wanted to show you very quickly as to how to use AI to manage the devastating issue of COVID today. Thank you for the opportunity. Be happy to answer any questions and be part of the panel. Mille grazie.
Thank you very much, Sheldon. Quite interesting. And we'll conclude the presentations by crossing again the Atlantic Ocean and asking Matteo Roffilli to describe the Bioretics as well as the BRAIN initiative, which is an interesting, very interesting transatlantic research tool for research and an atlas of the human brain. Matteo, over to you.
So thank you guys for being there. First slide. So I represent Bioretics, that are a small company located in the seaside of Emilia Romagna, near to Monte Argentario. I came from Livorno. So we are mostly involved in R&D for machine vision based on machine learning. So what we do is attaching meaning to raw data, where data are very, very big on different shape, mainly from healthcare and the life science. Next slide. So we started more than 20 years ago with the X-ray digital mammography for computer detection. It was a very, very first pioneering approach with what's called machine learning, now artificial intelligence, to computer detection. And then we moved to next slide, please. Then we moved to another kind of data for digital pathology with a pioneer project. In that case, data moved from megabytes to gigabytes. So for instance, a digital size has more than 300 gigabytes. So we scale up, we make a scale up, and we also gain a lot of experience on managing, anonymizing data and the screening program for instance, for women population. Next slide. So we came up to this project. We are involved in two different phases of the same project for studying the brains, for the US Brain Initiative, and also with data from the Human Brain Project. Both of them are in collaboration with the European Laboratory for Spectrography, that's called LENS in Florence, which is the provider for the raw data. So next slide. The workflow is quite easy, and I can show you in a couple of words. You start from a brain, and the brain are for US. You cut the brain and make a slice of them. Then you ship the slices to overseas to Florence. In Florence, there are a new kind of a microscope called the light sheet SPIM that's able to imaging those slices at 1 micrometer resolution isotropic. Then you have a lot of data. I show you in the next slide the terabyte of data, what you can do with this data. You need to attach meaning to those data. And so the red one are data coming from the microscope, and the right part of the slide is what you can come up by analyzing those data with AI algorithms for deep learning, machine learning, and the hybrid of them. You can transform data into vectorial representation that are credible for visualizing, for human to make decision support system, or for other algorithm to analyze them. And those data will then be stored into different parts for the US in the Dundee repository, and for Europe in a brains repository. So next slide. But if we take a more detailed look at data, you can see that's one brain, just one brain is about 10,000 terabytes of raw data, 10 petabyte. So it's very hard to process them. The workflow is about 3,000 gigabytes per second, and we are able to process them on the fly, so in real time. Also, give right to the Seymour Crane, now to CINECA HPC, other facility. We can use this kind of computation to make the all stuff working in the real time. Then you have to compress data to make storage. You have different type of compress. If you use the compress by semantic interpretations, so if you are able to attach data, meanings to data, you can compress 10,000 terabyte up to 20 terabyte in a semantic fashion. All data stored in a vectorial fashion and an open format that's you can interchange with other programs or for humans. So at the end, the last slide, please. The frontier now is there. Some years ago, the Human Gene Project, you see a lot of 0.0000000 petabyte. Then you can move to Human Connectome, a big project for the wiring of the brain. You get for one brain about 0.03 petabyte. If you get 1 year, just 1 year in the world, you have all data from 1 year, it's about 20 petabyte all Google Map data. And you see just one brain, it's about the same. So the idea is that Europe is making this work for scientific frontier for mankind, and the US want to make business on them. So to make an ecosystem like in Boston and so on for patients' healthcare, for Alzheimer, Parkinson, and so on. But you will have a lot of petabyte data to analyze and also to storage. And also the privacy and the federation of data is a big issue because there are a lot of problems to manage this kind of data and also this amount of scale. So that's all for me. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Grazie, Matteo. I want to, just before we go into the discussion, I want to thank our rapporteur, Maurizio Sobrero, full professor at the University of Bologna. So thank you very much. We're going to go into the panel. For the participants, there is the ability to ask questions. And so please ask if you have additional questions. You can ask them in the chat box. And I will do my best to summarize the questions and perhaps ask them time permitting. Of course, you will have the ability to further interact with the participants during the business forum tomorrow or during alternative means. So since we're talking about data, and a common theme which we have heard across all the panelists is accessing data, especially accessing data which is within healthcare providers, either within a fascicolo electronico or electronic health record or a hospital system or some other source. Perhaps my first question would be exactly, how has this been done? How have the challenges of mobilizing and aggregating clinical data been done within the context of the GDPR, which is the European regulation for data protection? I will have the same question in a Canadian context, but I'm going to first ask within the European context. I think perhaps I'll turn it over to Alessandro Ferri, who perhaps can give us some comments on this.
On how we should manage the data especially from the clinical setting. Currently, of course, there are both regulatory and technical challenges in making data harmonized according to some standards. And this is the way to go. So to adopt technologies that enable us to capture information from the electronic medical records in a standardized way. Nevertheless, in our experience at the European level, while building a large clinical database for research purposes, still is not a technical issue, but also a political issue, with many clinics driving their decision not only towards the value of data sharing, but of managing this independently. So I think that both the technical issue in aggregating data, standardizing them, goes beyond the culture of the researcher, of the clinics, of the hospitals, of sharing their data to create a larger value for research.
Good. Perhaps if we try to drive a bit deeper that conversation, Marco, you've done that within the context of a region in Emilia Romagna, in Reggio Emilia, how did you manage? You have different clinical sites within that region. How did you manage to access from different sites? Can you give us some insights, please, Marco?
Yes. Hi, Cédric. Thank you. Well, the two problems that our colleague Ferry just mentioned, the first one, the technical one, is actually the easiest one. Okay, so and we managed to actually solve it, or at least try to solve it in the past. It has taken some time, but it was basically set mandatory by the region. The Fascicolo Sanitario Elettronico, and providing information in a standardized way at the central level is now national regulation. Of course, some regions have started earlier, like Emilia Romagna region, so the Fascicolo Sanitario Elettronico is effective now, and it is also some years of data in it. Some other regions are have started more recently, but in perspective, it should become a national standard. And this solves the technical issue in the sense that all data is standardized and is centralized also in terms of access. The other issue is mostly the cultural one, which anyway is solved by the fact that it's a regulation, but also the regulatory one, the GDPR. What we can do with the data that we have gathered is now limited. The regional level actually by Italian regulations has some possibility to actually perform analysis and use it for public health. That has specific provisions within the regulation that with the regional and national level can do that. The issue, the problem, the GDPR issue, the privacy issues become serious when we want to share data with private institutions or share it among different institutions around Europe, because of course that implies mostly the fact that you have to have consent to use all the data from the patient for research reasons. So that opens up a whole set of issues. So what we're trying to do in the Emilia Romagna region is actually to have a region which is allowed to actually perform research and do data analysis to be the central authorizing entity for others to actually perform the processing and do the research. So that the current regulation is set up in a way that basically the region and the national level are the levels that can actually perform this.
Interesting. I'm going to ask Alexandre from Imagia to comment on this. Alexandre, you federated a number of different places. You're working across hospitals. How do you manage to solve that problem of data access?
Thank you, Cédric. So I would say the problems comes from the 3 T, the traceability, the transparency, and the trust. So last year, Government of Canada have initiated a digital charter. And yesterday, there was a lot of announcement and improvement around the evolution of that digital charter around transparency, but also around heavy penalty for players that will not ensure that patient data is safe. So one way to make sure that patient data are kept in a safe way, especially when you want to collaborate across jurisdictions. So if you want to have a collaboration under PIPEDA for Canada, under HIPAA, and under GDPR, you quickly manage the complexity of that, is to keep the data where it is. So rather than having a central big tower, as I was referring earlier, a repository, a single data trust, we prefer to have a distributed data trust. So each organization keeps their own data, and there are artificial intelligence techniques that allow to get insights from those distributed centers without moving the data. So the only thing that you exchange are AI models, models that will have learned from those distributed data. So that solves a lot of problem by design. So we think that we should look at what are the issue and trying to solve it by design. Having a single data trust for the whole planet will be very difficult to achieve. People want to collaborate. People want to share knowledge, wants to share expertise. When it's come to sharing all your data, the challenge is more difficult. So this is what we're proposing, and this is what we're using amongst different hospitals, especially as part of our DHDP initiative. And we have shown that the performance when we do such kind of federated learning approach is almost as good as if you were to pull out all the data with all the complexity that entails in a single repository. So specifically across jurisdiction, we really think that those kind of federated learning approach are key to success, transparency, trust, and traceability of data.
It's very interesting, Alexandre. We have an investment exactly in this field, which bridges Stanford, Boston, the US, and Canada and Europe. So I'm wondering if perhaps Matteo could comment on this, because you're trying to pull data from between the US and Europe, if I'm not mistaken. I understand it's at the research level. Can you comment on this, please?
Yes, the issue is a bit articulated. So, for instance, US and NIH, that's the founding for our research, was that data should be there in their country, in Boston or in Washington. Europe has a different, a bit different approach, because you can publish data on a brace service for public. So, but the main is that you can federate, as a previous speaker, and you can make a border shipping of elaborated data, like a hashing code that cannot recover original data, but useful for AI algorithms. One issue is that you can create a bias. So by giving only a part of your data free for this kind of use, you can create a bias on the final result of AI, for instance, from gender and so on. There's a good debate, because many things are not clearly explainable. So when we will have a white box, so you can clearly see what's inside an AI hardware, you can do this federation very, very good. We can also assess the quality of data you have access to. So there is a big difference from Europe and US. US want to make money on that, so data is added value, then want to be shared with others after they are making a standard on that. Europe is more, as you know, academic. So fund from Europe produce a bit of a big batch of data, and those data should be shared to whole Europe, whole the world for academic research. And if you are a company, you can make business of it. So it's a very different situation for my perspective, but clearly we are one of the first providers of this kind of data. So there is a big impact on what will be the standard for storage, manage, and process them, because there are a lot of data. For my previous experience, that's for X-ray. In X-ray, you go into the hospital on the risk on the healthcare system. They don't want to share the DICOM image to the other. So that's a problem. So I spent a lot of my young time inside the door of the physician to get access to their data, and many of them are not anonymized. So one is the real thing. So I asked for them, don't give me the name of the patient, because I could know it. Please don't give me the name. But they told me, okay, erase you the name. This is the data I have to work. So the Europe situation in the X-ray hospital, to my knowledge, in the middle part of Europe is a bit different from US, where there are big protocol and very clearly assessed to manage this kind of issues. There are a lot of them.
Thank you very much. Actually, why don't we dive deeper on the X-ray stuff with Marco? With Fabio Galbusera at Galeazzi. You're using the data to my knowledge, within the Galeazzi hospitals, but Galeazzi is related to other hospitals. Have you tried to generate insights from data of other sites? And if yes, the challenges you've got or the potential problems you will get? Over to you.
Well, actually, yes, we tried actually, and but we also have challenges inside the Galeazzi, because you know we are basically sitting on a gold mine, because we have a huge database of images of X-rays and other types of imaging. But before we them for scientific use only and educational use, we need to write an application to the ethics committee and get the approval from the ethics committee. And we need to have the informed consent, as it was mentioned already. It's very important that we have the informed consent by the subject, by all the patients, in order to process the data, even in anonymized form for scientific use. So that's a critical steps that we need to achieve before starting working with the data. And then we have practical problems because, these hospitals are quite old structures and they were not structured from the beginning to collect data. So we have data in different databases and they have different formats. In some cases, it's not even easy to perform queries. For example, on our PACS system, which is the database that collects all the images, I cannot run a query about some types of images, some types of patient and all the images together. That's not possible. And I need to download images by hand or to let's use some tricks in order to do the things. So it's practically a quite complicated thing. And if we want to share the images with someone else, then of course the first thing to do is to write a data transfer agreement that needs to be signed by both parties. That needs to go through the legal offices. That takes time, of course. It's a little bit complicated. And after that, we are usually we are the images inside the EU in anonymized form, of course, with no big problems. We never, as far as I know, sent images outside of the EU, so I don't really have a direct experience about that. I would like to comment a little bit about the last question about the surgeon or the medical doctor that gave the images just from the study with names and so on. Because that's a problem with the persons. This is not allowed in the EU as well. So that's not how it should work in the EU. So we have protocols for that as well. This is not what should happen in any case, also here. So we don't do that, and that shouldn't happen.
That's very interesting. Very interesting.
Cédric,
yes, go ahead, Sheldon.
Thank you. So I think what, and I totally appreciate what our colleagues are saying with respect to big data, but I think obviously personal data, all right, with respect to our finances or our health, obviously totally important to an individual. And this has been one of the obstacles for managing COVID, all right, with respect to contact tracing apps where people don't want to download the software, be it in Germany, be it in Italy, be it in Canada, in order to help the public health authorities manage exposure to COVID. And so I think one of the solutions, and obviously critically important for success going forward, is to be able to, our approach is that the data, the analysis is all on the cell phone and it is not sent anywhere. An individual uses it to scan themselves. It does not go anywhere unless that individual decides to send it somewhere. So it's critically important to be compliant with obviously HIPAA and GDPR and PIPEDA in Canada. And that's the only way we are going to go forward to make sure that from a privacy standpoint, the data is all protected. But because from a public health initiative, this would be a fantastic, fantastic opportunity.
And in fact, Sheldon, what you've done is effectively the data resides within the actual patient or user to a certain extent, and so therefore, only that's quite an interesting approach, and in a way resembles what happens in other sectors and to your financial data, for instance, and other things. I'm wondering if that's what you seem to be doing, John, at Opal MedApps, right, where the patients, correct me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, when the patients in the public healthcare system at large institutions like the MUHC with McGill donate their data. So give us perhaps your insights on this, right, and accessing data. How do you get patients to donate, and what are the concerns on this donation to then use it properly? Over to you, John.
So thank you, Cédric. So yeah, exactly what we're trying to do. So we don't yet have this operational, but the project that we're working towards, and our first goal is really to understand what patients want, and to survey patients and to have focus groups with patients to see what are the barriers and what are the issues that patients have with donating data. So in our first analysis, in our first study of this, we found that 60% of our patients who participated in our survey would donate their data off the bat. And that is without knowing the details of it. But there have been other studies that show that if patients know where their data are going and they know which data are needed for a particular study, they might be willing to donate the data for the study if those data are acceptable to them. In other words, if we ask patients to donate all of their data, they may not do so because there may be some data that they don't want to donate. But if we know the data that we need, and we invite patients to donate just the data that we need and make sure that they understand what it is we need, then if those data are acceptable for donation, patients may choose to donate them, and knowing that they're not donating data that they don't want to donate. So it's really about, I guess, going back to what Alexander was saying, it's about transparency and trust. And also, you know, when you donate money to a good cause, you like to know where your money goes. And you like to know that people have done good work with it, and you like to get feedback. So we know that our foundations are very good at newsletters, helping their donors understand where their money has gone, so that next time they come back to ask for more money, they know that their money has been used for a good cause in the first place. So really, it's about engaging patients so that they know where their data are going, and they know that we're dealing with them well, that we've got all the safeguards in place, and they get good feedback.
It's interesting because there's really two approaches, and I'm not saying they're both equally interesting, but there's the channel through patient donation of data, and of course maintaining the anonymity of this. And there is another approach, which is more, let's say, at the system level, where you're trying to get, as per earlier comments, the region to somehow be involved in interregional. They both have pros and cons. Obviously, this assumes that the patient is able to donate data. The data, in many cases, is embedded in deep into systems that may not speak to one another. Not all regions have the chance to have the fascicular electronico to the level of Emilia Romagna, for instance. We have in Canada an electronic health record, but which is unevenly deployed across regions and unevenly accessible. For instance, it's quite interesting to see the two approaches. And obviously, Alexandre's comment on not porting the data, but generating learnings within the data set is extremely interesting, because I actually think that it will be almost impossible. It will take a very long time to have a unanimous global approach to this. There are so many regional differences. The legal systems are different between countries. We share a civil law system between Italy and Quebec, for instance, but there's common law in the rest of Canada. The rules are slightly different, and it becomes impossible to manage. And just
to that point, yes, Cédric,
yes.
If I may, when we talk about patient donation of data, they want to give their consent, but they want those data to be anonymized for most of those consent. The problem is some of the data are very difficult to anonymize, like genomic data. There's technique where you can encrypt them, but this is why I think that the federated learning approach that we use on both unstructured data and structured data have very a merit to ensure that collaboration can happen now. So I'll encourage people to read about it and make sure that the bias concept that we've discussed earlier is really captured early on into the data gathering process. Because most of the time, to do clinical research, you need certain time of data, but when you want to do AI, you want also have access to the metadata. You want to know how the data was acquired, and that can have an influence also on the data. So there's a lot of subtlety when you do AI on the data, and you want to ensure that you capture that early on.
And speaking about this, Alexandre, what are some of, this is a broad question, and I'm just going to ask you some quick fire answers. What could be done, to demonstrate the value of these efforts so that there is greater acceptance, either by the patients themselves, the healthcare system, or the population as a whole? What are the kinds of things that could be done to make this case? Should we make, or should the industry or researchers make the case for the benefits of this to patients, Should risks be properly managed? What are the kinds of things that work? What are the kinds of things that don't work to make the case for this? I'll ask perhaps, Alexandre, actually, if you can answer this one first, and after that, I'll ask a few others on this topic. Alexandre, over to you.
So there's two concepts. Either you try to get that patient adoption, or so by telling them this is good, or you want to have more their insights and they understand how having this sharing concept without sharing the data is a good way to go. So I think there's a lot of education that need to be done so people can understand better what's at stake, because it's always a balance between having collaboration on your data and making sure that some of those discovery will help you or someone in your family. So education is key here. You don't want to impose a specific strategy, and this will backfire.
I'll turn it over to Alessandro at Advice Pharma, right? You're using data, and you have applications for CRO, and then you work with pharma companies. How did you manage to get this acceptable in the context of Lombardia and Milano, and generally in Europe, you're trying to expand?
Well, if you mean about the issue of data sharing, of course, this is what we are trying to do from different sides. First, again, I underline how the education of both starting from the patient, but also including the doctors and the decision makers on how sharing data that is essential to create value for research purposes, both if the research is for no-profit organization, either for profit entities. Therefore, what we do is not only just to provide a solution in terms of technologies, but also to try to explain the process. And especially what we see from our practice is that to explain how the data will be managed. So provide, for example, documents on data governance to all the stakeholders of the system can help to understand how they will be processed and how they will be used. And this really helps everybody to understand, to be engaged in the adoption of not only our technologies, of course, but also of any kind of technology. If we speak about a wearable device, if we speak about apps, first, it's important to explain how the system will work and which to use, and then the technicalities will follow.
Marco, could you pick up? Marco, could you pick up on this in the context of Reggio Emilia? You're well advanced, and why are you so? What did you do, or what did the region do to make this acceptable to the citizens and the patients on this?
Well, the whole Sole platform and the Fascicolo Sanitario Elettronico was meant in the beginning to be actually a service for the patients themselves. Therefore, it was based, starting from the beginning, as a service, something done for the patients. Of course, the side uses that have come up, the secondary use of data, was basically done by informing the patient that their own Fascicolo Sanitario and the Sole project was extending its functionalities to also provide something else. I must also say that the Fascicolo Sanitario, the infrastructure itself, allows for the patient to control directly the use of their data by giving consent within the system to use their data for secondary uses. Therefore, this gives a perception to the citizens, true perception actually, that they have full control on what where the data goes and how the data is used. Therefore, this perception of actually being in control, having the possibility to click and provide total privacy to their data, which is something they can do, but they often don't do because they perceive that it's useful not to do it. It gives some kind of trust between the institution and the patients themselves. And so I must say that probably the fact that the trust has been built in the beginning with the primary use of the fascicolo sanitario elettronico helped a lot to actually have allow for secondary uses, and provided also that the patients can control these secondary uses actively by using the same interface that they use to actually see their data.
That's very interesting, Fabio. We should continue the discussion because Marco, because in Canada, we probably use a more provider-centric approach on the AHR as opposed to patient-centric. And we should separately discuss that. And I'll ask in succession John and then Sheldon, but John first, where you're from the MUHC, there's an EHR within the MUHC, patients donate data. What are your thoughts then on this acceptability of patient donation, acceptability of use? What are the kinds of things you're trying to implement to ensure adoption of your project?
Yeah, so I'm fascinated by the last speaker because exactly that is what we need to do is get the patient all of their data. As yet, we don't have patients donating data at the MUHC. This is something we're working and building in, but really it's about building a single infrastructure. It's a single infrastructure rather than two infrastructures, not an infrastructure for research and the background that we use, but an infrastructure that brings clinicians, patients, and researchers all using the same infrastructure, so that we're not building something separate. And then, yes, the patient is getting access to their data and getting control over who has access to their data, and ultimately able to share data with not just researchers, but with the same infrastructure, able to share data with primary care providers, perhaps, or with other people, even their family caregivers that they may wish to share data with as well. So if we could build a single infrastructure for data sharing and really put it in the control of the patient, I think there's a lot that can be done with it. So that's kind of what we're thinking of and where we're trying to go.
Either that, and to build on the comments of Alexandre, using the principles of federated learning without actually moving across silos, that would probably be the way forward. So Sheldon, you obviously have, I'll turn it over to you, Sheldon, which is, you obviously have data generated by patients, and then patients can communicate, let's say, with insurance companies for various things. Help us understand how you are trying to ensure adoption and patient acceptance of this and the kinds of things.
So thanks, Cédric. And I think it's, again, really important to go down to a very granular level. So despite what the rest of the folks on the panel are saying, how important it is to structure the data in the electronic medical record, and we as physicians have generally made these platforms really, really work well for the doctors or the hospitals or the insurance companies or the governments. But an individual, somebody with a grade 7 education or even a college education, has no clue how to manage that information for them in a way that resonates. If you go on OpenTable, you can do things more effectively, or you do your own financing, you can do things more effectively than managing your own health. So I think what's critical is for people to be involved. The patients, mama, papa, everybody, senior citizens, how do you understand the information that is residing in the medical record, et cetera, or the radiology? What does it mean, my glucose is the following, or my heart condition is the following? People have no clue. And as doctors, we generally do a lousy job of communicating data in a proper way so when you're saying, how do you drive acceptance or adoption? It's when we really understand what the patient needs and what they're going to use, and understanding, okay, what's the actual benefit in my hands today to manage my health or my family's health? And when we can do that, you will get much more patient adoption, which is exactly why we have 4 million people on CareBook right now doing what we just showed you, and a lot of other stuff that are using this to manage their health in a way that they understand.
It's very interesting, very interesting what you say. So basically, the whole concept of showing the value and building eventually patient empowerment. You see some of these initiatives in the States as well, right now among some of the leading sites. Do panelists want to make additional comments on this? Otherwise, I have another question brief, and after that, we'll conclude.
Briefly, so I totally agree with Sheldon. You tell me to disagree with people, but for the concept of autonomy that we've seen in a lot of AI ethical declaration, including the Montreal Ethical Declaration, we want to have user, it can be patient, it can be clinician also, be autonomous both in the usage and the discovery. So one of the concepts that we've introducing is ensuring first from the clinical side that the doctor can make the discovery on their own without using at their side every step of the way an AI expert. So we really want to empower people to do their own discovery at their own pace. So the same thing should apply to patients. I totally agree with that.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, just my last word about it. I don't want that too much data be in one site, because it's like nuclear power. If you have a lot of data in one site, if you have available computing power, you can make a lot of things. And computing power is just for some big company in some big country. So probably federation now is a way to slow down the process for AI. AI is too powerful if you have so much data in one place. So I guess we be careful by technicians, not by only politicians or memorandum of understanding or so on. Take data in your country for at least 1 or 2 years before AI will be more expendable, and we are more concerned about what we can do, because we can do a lot of things, not so easy to manage.
Just one of the questions we had from the audience had to do with cloud computing and cloud storage. A lot of that data is sometimes stored in cloud and may actually be leak out just because of the risks of cloud storage or the cloud altogether. Have you encountered those kinds of issues, and how have you managed these issues? Maybe brief comments on this.
So that's why we're leaving the data at each hospital side. So to the previous comment, I would disagree that federated learning cannot achieve similar results from a distributed computing power. We have results, we've shown that. So I think it's better to keep the data where it is, specifically because there's a lot of data that is being acquired, a lot of raw data, moving those data around, and specifically putting it in a single repository, put it as a big cybersecurity threat. The cybersecurity threat have been increasing since the pandemic. So we have to be careful where the data resides. So if it's distributed, I think the risk is less less important.
One last comments on this, and then I'll close the discussion. Anybody else?
Cédric, say a few words.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I think I agree with the earlier comments, but just to add that I don't think nation and federation are necessarily opposite things, that they can work together. But one thing I would say in terms of federation for cross jurisdiction, but within jurisdictions, we may want to gather the data together, because we often know that patients are not just treated in one center, but they may have treatment in multiple centers. So we do need to gather those data in order to get a rich picture of what is happening to the patient.
The whole notion of continuity of care, which may be interregional indeed, especially in a large quaternary medical center like the MUHC, or for that matter, Bologna or Milano or Reggio Emilia, that will have things. Okay. Other questions, other comments from the panelists?
So John, to your comment about data being spread around, there's a concept called horizontal federated learning, where you can take data from multiple sites and reconcile it with the patient data, which is, I think, one of the key solutions to understand the full trajectory of care. And I agree that having central repository that are regional is a good thing, but from a global perspective and trans-jurisdiction, it's better to use a federated learning approach, because we want to move now, and there's pressing matter to make new discoveries.
I think we will. This will definitely be the object of multiple conversations, and I encourage the panelists and the audience to interact on this. Ultimately, the ultimate goal is to provide value for the patients, advanced research, and ultimately personalized care. So it could be through research or business opportunities. But one of the things that strikes me in all of this is for that to work, supercomputing is required, right? We'll have tons of data. We'll need to have supercomputing applications. And that's actually a nice segue into our closing keynote. Before I do that, I will thank the panelists for extremely insightful comments and, agreeing to disagree from time to time. That's very, very just fine, actually, because these are complicated issues. And they will be available through the chat room or through the business forum for further conversations and to further increase collaboration between Canada and Italy. I'll turn it over to Professor Sanzio Bassini, who is the Director of Supercomputing Applications at CINECA in Bologna, and he will close this panel on a keynote conversation on the supercomputing, which we need to achieve the applications in healthcare. Professor Bassini, grazie, and over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm not a professor in reality. I'm just a professional from this point of view.
I should say Dr. Bassini in that case.
Yes, but that's fine. No issue.
That's okay. Over to you.
So that's okay. Very good. What is CINECA? If you go to the next slide, just to immediately go through my presentation. So CINECA is the largest supercomputing facility in Italy. It manages currently the Marconi 100 system that it's been open in operation this year in February, and which has been ranked number 9 and top 500 in June. Currently it's number 11, so there have been a couple of, but that is sliding windows, so that is normal. I'm meaning that we are frequent flyers of the top 10, top 500 indeed. We are going to host one of the 3 pre-exascale systems procured by the IRCCS joint undertaking in Europe. And that it will be open in operation first quarter 22, and will be the most fastest artificial intelligence enabling systems in the world. When it will be in production, it will have in excess of 10 exaflop of AI power. So that is the infrastructures, and so we are managing that kind of infrastructure. Let's go through the slide number 4, just to share that we are core partners of many of the projects that I think has been mentioned during this the workshop, the entire workshop. So just to mention today, there have been the mentioning related to the Human Brain Project, of which we are core partners, but you see that it's the current active project. If you go to the next slide, we decided to go very strong in elaborating new project in the domain of life science, because we do think that the life science, generally speaking, it will be one of our main drivers for development, addressing what will be the main socioeconomic challenge. I have to say, just for your knowledge, that the others main drivers will be what we call Destination Earth, which is the supporting the digital twins related to the Earth systems. So, I mean, in the context of life science, we are going to work on new 5 different projects that have been funded quite significantly. I wouldn't go through all, but just for mentioning, with respect also some of the consideration that has been done during the panel discussions, I would address Genomet for All, that is a project related to genomics and personalized medicine for all through artificial intelligence. So the idea is to set up, starting from the hematological diseases, what it would be the idea of developing a European platform for genomics and personalized medicine for all. That is the idea of such a project. It will be one of the integrated projects at the European level. We are talking about a budget, an overall budget in the excess of 20 million euro for such a project. So just to mention, but if you go to the next slides, I will go through a couple of others, specific projects, just mentioning what is the current portfolio. So the current portfolio that on which we are working, it's an instrument, or let's say a platform that has been trademarked by Dompe, related to what it will be the docking. So I'm talking about the Legion. Then an observatory for the health governance systems at national level. I'm talking about the Arno project, and also I'm talking about the development of a national federated HPC infrastructures in Italy. I'm talking about the Super project, where the pilot, one of the direct pilot, it's the biobanking and the genomic data processing. So in principle, the idea is that the tier 0 CINECA system will be federated with the tier 1 system in Italy, okay? And the pilot, it will be biobanking and genomic data processing. The idea is to work in a way that, as has been said, that will be at the same time opportunity for enabling what it will be the distributed and federated HPC infrastructures, of course, GDPR compliant. If you go to the next, I would talk a little bit more with respect to the network for Italian genome. Okay, so that is a specific implementations of what it would be the way for managing the GDPR compliances with respect of the setting up of the national genome databases. Okay, that it would not only be driven by the pathologies, but also that are being driven by the typical genome of Italian populations used by references. The hospitals that have been agreed are the one shown just this morning, by the way. Careggi Hospital in Florence joined the group, and there have been many other, but at the end, all the main hospital in Italy will be part of this network. If you go to the next slide, the point is, in a very pictorial way, what it would be the mode where the GDPR would be managed. So it means that the user may do have an access to a virtual computing systems here in CINECA, on our infrastructures. So we manage HPC facility to provide cloud-wise access also, so a virtual systems into the HPC facility, it's possible. So that virtual system, it will be fully managed by the users, okay? And only the level of metadata could be shared among the group. So all the data that would be not subject to the GDPR constraint will be shared, while the data that are under GDPR concern related to what it will be the security, privacies, and reservations will not be shared, apart that the owner, where the owner is the user, may do provide access on the basis of what will be the compliances, like you see the patient agreement, the ethical committee agreement, and so on and so forth. So the idea is to having a GDPR compliance, and so we have been technically and also politically, let me say, successful in the sense with respect of the setting up a reference database for the full genomic databases for the Italian populations. I would not spend too much time on that because I would like to go till the end of my deck of slides, and so I would like to go to the next project on which we are involved, which is the project related to the management of the course of contagious at European level. This is a very Italian-driven project, even if it's a pan-European project. It's a kind of integrated project funded with 30 million euro by the European Commission. So we're talking about a very, very large project, absolutely Italian-driven. You see what are the, pan-European view and also worldwide view related to what will be the management of the cohorts of COVID. If you go to the slide number 11, that is the structures. There is the workflow also, but that is not very much you can eventually share afterward. Let's go to the next slide where there is the descriptions of the portal. Very good. So that it's the structures of the project. So there will be 3 main national lab in Italy, Germany, and France, and our counterparts HPC facility in France and in Germany would act as the national IT hub. Okay, those kind of data with the base of what would be the model that I described before for our experience related to the management of the genome for the population would be implemented at national level. Then the elaborated data that at that point would not be anymore restricted by the GDPR compliance would represent the sharing of the data, and we are going to provide AI computing resources and also AI support for the modeling related to what it will be the support of decisions systems related to the management of the contagion. One may observe that we are already in the very middle of the pandemic, and the project that have been just started may do look a little bit anachronistic. The point is that we have to be ready next time. That is the real point, okay? Of course, that will be impact with respect of what will be the management of the current pandemic, but the main point is be ready for what may be the next situations. And it's quite evident that from the point of view of the risk management and the resiliences of the European systems, and eventually we will be ready to share at worldwide level, but at least for the European systems, we do need to have those kind of infrastructures in place. So that is a very important project at this level. Let's go to the next and last project for which I would like to share our experience. We are talking about the Escalate for COV project. Again, that it's a very Italian-driven project. You can see from the point of view of the partnership how many Italian partners, and so we're talking real about the excellence in Italy. Looks, just to make an example, Elettra Synchrotron in Trieste, that is the second largest synchrotron in Europe. One may observe why a synchrotron. Okay, so we do need the crystallographic structures of the proteins of the virus in order to elaborate the homology of the protein for simulating the docking. So we do need the competence of the synchrotron with respect to the diffractometry for having 3D structures, crystallographic structures of the protein, just to make an example. The same with respect of the National Institute of Nuclear Physics, from the point of view of what will be the management of the data that will come from the synchrotron, then CINECA, Polytechnic of Milan, and other. Ultimately, the project is coordinated by Dompé Farmaceutica, the Italian pharmaceutical company. The main objective of the project, next slide please, again is to establish a sustainable scientific standard to give quick responses to any pandemic scenario, okay? So we, at this point in time, we are working against COVID, but the point is to addressing what may be a response to any pandemic scenario in terms of drug repurposing and in terms of a new drug design. We are working to considering also to support the design of antibodies, monoclonal antibodies, where the same approach it could be applied also, and so we are thinking to establish some connections with respect of the producer of the vaccine to support also the virtual screening for the vaccine. Currently, the project is oriented to the therapeutic approach, so it's oriented to what will be the quickly identifications of available drugs. I wouldn't spend too much with respect to the overall structures. Go to the outcomes. Slide number 15. Very good. So that is the first outcomes that have been mentioned, and also by the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and so we are very proud. So the raloxifene, that which has been identified by the process that's been used for running the first 400,000 compound against the 15 proteins of the coronavirus, identified the raloxifene as one of the possible drug against. So the raloxifene, first of all, almost does cost nothing. So the idea is it's a very, 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 very extremely cheap kind of drug, which is a good news in the sense that it could be distributed without any restrictions, and also that is over there since years and years, and so it's absolutely known and safe in man since a lot of years. Nevertheless, there have been last October, there have been the green flag from AIFA, which is the Italian National Agency for the pharma distributions, that gave the green flag for the clinical study in a few weeks, that it will be available for therapy, hopefully, if everything goes well. But we are very positive in the sense that, as I said, it's a very well-known kind of drug available. Then there have been, next please, there have been just yesterday signed an agreement with South Korea for addressing the same kind and sharing the same kind of data related to what it will be the clinical trials for the raloxifene in South Korea. What next? A little bit. So, okay. There are novel drugs under evaluations. We are talking in this case of chemotherapeutic. Before we were talking about antiviral, and now we are talking about chemotherapeutic. So from this point of view, the issues related to the toxicity, it's a little bit more complicated, but the point is that, as you see, the two Trexate drug available, one that has been launched really very many years ago in 1984, so we're talking about, roughly speaking, 30 years ago, has a very high level of potency. So from the point of view that it could be a very good opportunity for therapeutic. The same for the Trexate that it's been launched almost 10 years ago. Safe in man from the point of view of the chemotherapy, of course, have to be addressed because we are talking about, if you can go to the next, because we are talking about the chemotherapy that be a little bit more complicated clinical validation, and so we have to go through the preclinical proof of concept, we have to go through the drug potencies in different cells and so on and so forth, but nevertheless we are considering that, and so I mean the pharmaceutical industries have been already started the process related to the securing the manufacturing in Europe, that more or less at the end of the third clinical trial phases around March, even that could be, so that it's a very, very kind of a good candidate for therapy, the COD. If you go to the next slide, that is the next challenge that we are trying to address. Last weekend there been the test. The next weekend we will make again, and we do repeat the numerical simulations. So the idea is that the aim is to simulate the behavior of the virus with respect of 70 billions of molecules against the 15 virus proteins. Okay, the idea is 1 trillion of interactions. Okay, then to provide those kind of data available to the community on the basis of a certain level of reductions. From the point of view of the simulations, the simulation, it will be a little bit 300 times larger and 500 times faster of the same simulation that has been already addressed by the Oak Ridge National Laboratory in US using the Summit HPC system. In this specific occasion, we are going to use the HPC5 HPC system of ENI, which is the Italian oil company that it do open its system, which is the most powerful HPC system in Europe now, and Marconi 100, and optimized the workflow designed by SAS to exploit the SAS VA platform for artificial intelligence and advanced data modeling. More or less, there is the scheme of the next slide. There is the scheme of what it will be the workflow. So in principle, the idea is that there will be a sort of machine learning approach related to what it will be the differences, or let's say the gradients related to the free energy in docking estimations. The same would happen with respect of that is for preparations of the big run. Okay, so the preparation of the big run is that we do need to provide the billions of molecules for addressing the trillions of docking, so that it's for the preparations of the physical-based and the structures of the molecules that would be used for the docking simulation, the virtual screen. That it's for the preparation, that the active loop number 2 related to what will be the post-processing of the data in order to considering when a docking would be considered converged with respect of the ending of the numerical simulations, and so from the point of view estimating what will be the workload and steer the process of the running in order to converge at a certain point with respect of the conclusion, and avoiding that it will be a continuously iterating kind of project. So machine learning and artificial intelligence everywhere to steer that kind of process. That will be other step up front for the steering process related to what it will be the effectiveness, or estimated what it will be the effectiveness of the compounds identified by the docking process, by the virtual screen process. Also based that it's currently mostly still done by hand, of course, by using post-processing applications, but by hand and not yet steered by an artificial intelligence approach, and so we're working about that. Fine.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bassini, we're going to have to wrap up the panel, so we'll give you 10 seconds to wrap up. You've already had to go ahead.
Last slide, just to say that the consortium it's available for providing 10 millions of dedicated computing hours to publicly available for others, for the others group around the world that would be ready to provide and to work with respect of our virtual screening platforms, and also to provide the availability of the outcome of the running for open data related to what it will be the outcome of the executions. So that
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Bassini. This was very insightful. Appreciate. We ran over, so thank you so much. This will conclude the digital workshop we had on healthcare. I would like to thank all the panelists, our keynote speaker, our reporter, also thank our official presenter, and thank the Italian Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Regione Emilia Romagna and Regione Lombardia, and Quebec for helping us do this. Thank you so much. We're looking forward to continuing conversations either tomorrow or today or through other channels. Thank you very much. There are other panels that have started that you may want to join, and we wish you a good continuation of the Business Forum. Thank you very much. Grazie. Merci beaucoup. À bientôt.